U.S. President Joe Biden gave the order for B-1 bombers to fly from the United States to the skies of Syria and Iraq and strike about 85 targets in retaliation for the deaths of 3 U.S. service members. When he decided how to retaliate, Joe Biden had to balance several objectives in his mind. How do you retaliate in such a way that you don't inadvertently escalate to the wider region and maybe even beyond into something like a regional or a world war? So let's step back and think about what does the U.S. under any president actually want in the region? In fact, what does the world want? What should we want? First of all, we don't want the war between Israel and the Palestinians to spread. We would like to start pacifying the war between Israel and Arabs, which has been going on for 75 years. We don't want another 75 years. That means we need the most important Sunni Arab country in the region, Saudi Arabia, to recognize Israel and make peace with it. But for that to happen, Israel has to do something as well. It has to finally give the Palestinians statehood, actual sovereignty. That doesn't happen overnight. And right now it's more unimaginable than ever before because of all the killing and dying and new rounds of hatred. But it has to happen. So we have to push the Israelis not to make it impossible. That probably means new leadership other than Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition in Israel. Then we need a new Palestinian leadership. That'll be hard too, because the existing one in the West Bank has been corrupt and weak. And we need to keep the Iranians out and frankly to keep ourselves in to make sure this doesn't blow up. Now, predictably, as soon as the 3 Americans were killed, there were howls of outrage by the Republicans, because we're in an election year.
Joe Biden's weakness produced this attack.
And the weakness that they've shown with respect to Iran has really empowered them in the region.
Forgetting that Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump, also had dealt with the same problem. There were Iranian strikes against American assets, and Trump sometimes retaliated, but in a measured way, and sometimes didn't. And the Republicans are calling Biden weak, so is he actually weak? Is his foreign policy weak? That's an interesting question, because then you have to zoom out and saying, what is his foreign policy? What Biden's been trying to do is to get out of the Middle East, to make it more stable by talking to the Saudi Arabians about recognizing Israel and having them have a sort of regional alliance that keeps Iran in check. And the Hamas attack on October 7th messed all of that up. Hamas did not attack because Biden is weak. If Hamas attacked, it's because they've been wanting to eradicate Israel for a long time anyway. So I wouldn't say it was weakness. I just think it's an incredibly dangerous world, because that's another thing you have to keep in mind about Joe Biden and any U.S. president, whether Donald Trump or anybody else next, is that we're in a kind of a new era, not the Cold War where we had one big enemy, but we have a lot of enemies. And unfortunately, they're increasingly aligning with each other. Vladimir Putin in Russia. There's Kim Jong-un in North Korea. There's Xi Jinping in China. There are the mullahs in Iran. And several of these enemies have nuclear weapons. When you strike back at somebody, when you deter somebody, it is nowadays you have to keep all of them in mind as if they were a new axis of evil. Iran, you may be surprised to learn, wasn't always an enemy of the US or Israel. We actually had good relations with Iran until the Iranian Revolution in 1978. And since then, this extreme version of Shia Islam has completely changed the way Iran has interacted with its region, where it has defined Israel, but also the US and the UK as its enemies. But their strategy for that has been to extend their reach and preserve plausible deniability by having not just its own army, but also by funding and training and equipping and arming lots of proxy armies in the region in a sort of ring around Israel. Of course, what happens over the time is you can't necessarily keep control of these proxies armies because they take on a life of their own. Sometimes they acted against Iran's orders or without Iran's knowledge. That adds to the instability. And one thing to realize is that it is several different conflicts that are overlapping and coming together. And unfortunately, the US is kind of muddled up in all of them in some way. And that's what makes this so dangerous.